When we hear the word child predator, most of us immediately think of men. But what happens when the predator is a woman? Society is not prepared for this reality, and yet it is more common than we want to believe. Today we look at the fate of 4 female child predators in prison. Samantha Ostras. The horrific fate of this child predator in prison will shock you. This mother from Tucson, Arizona, was sentenced to 15 years in prison after scalding her 5-year-old adopted daughter, Madison, in a boiling bath in December 2016. The result was third-degree burns over more than 80% of Madison's body, primarily from her chest down to her feet. This abuse was so severe that all of Madison's toes had to be amputated due to the damage caused by the burns. Madison was subjected to months of intensive care and continues to face a lifetime of medical treatment and surgeries to manage the scars left by her injuries. Following her arrest, Ostras' defense team argued that she herself had endured trauma as a child, having been neglected and abused by her biological parents, who had drug addictions. Despite this, Ostras faced a potential 24-year prison sentence, but ultimately she received 15 years, with an additional 15 years of probation after her release. Madison's biological parents had previously reported signs of abuse in other foster placements, including bruises and bite marks. She had been in and out of foster homes, including one connected to a pedophile ring. These red flags raised serious concerns about the foster care system's oversight, yet the warnings were ignored. But what happens to someone like Samantha in prison? Child abusers, especially those who harm their own children, face a tough reality in prison, and reports also suggest the same. Samantha was assaulted by fellow inmates just days after being incarcerated. After all, it's one thing to be sentenced by the court, but prison society often takes justice into its own hands. Rebecca joins. Imagine this. A math teacher walks into class one day and changes 2 students' lives forever, but not in the way you'd expect. This is the twisted story of Rebecca Joins, who abused her position to manipulate 2 15-year-old boys, crossing every line imaginable. It all began in 2021, as schools reopened after the COVID-19 lockdowns. Joins had ended a long-term relationship and found herself seeking validation in all the wrong places. This is where the first child, or boy 1 for confidentiality, comes into the picture. A 15-year-old student, he became the focus of her attention. It didn't take long for things to get inappropriate. But how did it even start? Well, it wasn't instant. In fact, she gave boy 1 her phone number, but with a twist. She didn't give him the full number. Instead, she made him figure out the last digit as part of a math challenge. Seems harmless, right? But this was just the beginning of something far more troubling. Their communication moved from school to Snapchat, where they exchanged flirty messages. And from there, it only escalated. They met outside school, and Joins even took him shopping at Manchester's Trafford Centre, where she bought him a Gucci belt for £350. Why didn't anyone notice? Well, the boy lied to his parents about where he was, which allowed the relationship to continue under the radar. This is where it gets worse. Boy 1 was sexually abused by Joins at her home on 2 different occasions. After Joins' first arrest in October 2021 for this relationship, you'd expect that to be the end of it. However, she was released on bail and instructed not to have any contact with minors. But instead of following the law, she moved on to another student, boy 2, who was also 15 years old. And just like before, the relationship grew through online messaging. But this time, there was an added layer of manipulation. She convinced her victim that she couldn't get pregnant. Well, that turned out to be a lie, because Joins did get pregnant with a child this time. Now, how did she break the news to the father? In one of the strangest details of the case, she created a date night atmosphere at her apartment. She decorated the place with rose petals and set up a series of clues that led to a final surprise, a baby onesie that read, "Best Dad." Can you imagine how overwhelming this must have been for a 15-year-old? At first, he wasn't sure if he should come forward with the truth about what had happened between him and Joins. After all, she was carrying his child. But after reflecting on it and speaking to people around him, boy 2 realized just how manipulated he had been. In his victim impact statement, he talked about replaying everything in his mind, finally coming to grips with the extent of the abuse. Eventually, Joins was arrested again for breaking bail conditions and faced even harsher consequences. In her May 2024 trial, the jury heard both victims' stories, and she was sentenced to over 6 years in prison. After her conviction, her baby was taken from her custody, limiting their contact. This caused her emotional distress, especially since she was denied regular updates about the child. In prison, Joins likely faces hostility, as inmates convicted of crimes involving children often do. Vicky Bevan. Let's get straight to it. Vicky Bevan, a name you might not have heard, but her crimes, they're chilling. Her story starts as a seemingly ordinary woman from St. Helens, Merseyside, but behind closed doors, she was living a double life. She became involved in an online network that indulged in the exploitation of children. Not much has been publicly shared about Bevan's early life before her crimes, but by her late 30s, she was married, which later ended in divorce. This event reportedly triggered a mental health decline, including a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, which her defense team tried to use as a mitigating factor during her trial. The abuse itself started as Bevan began interacting with two men, Paul Rafferty, 62, and Tony Hutton, 42. Together, they formed a ring of abuse where they not only assaulted a young girl under the age of 10, but also filmed the abuse and shared it with others online. This abuse spanned over 2 years, and Bevan was the ringleader who actively participated in and orchestrated much of the crime. In disturbing online exchanges with her co-conspirators, she expressed fantasies about kidnapping, raping, torturing, and even eating children. It was only when the authorities seized the phone of a third-party individual that the true extent of Bevan's actions came to light. The phone contained hundreds of messages and media files exchanged between Bevan and her co-conspirators, detailing their plans and documenting the abuse. Upon investigating further, Merseyside police raided Bevan's home in October 2021 and found incriminating material, including laptops and phones loaded with indecent images and videos. Bevan was arrested immediately, and her case progressed rapidly through the courts due to the overwhelming evidence against her. Initially charged with 11 offenses, that number later ballooned to 34 as investigators uncovered more of her crimes. The charges included multiple counts of rape and sexual assault of a child under 13, as well as the production and distribution of indecent images. Throughout her trial, Bevan displayed little remorse for her actions. In fact, her communications with the men revealed a terrifying lack of empathy or humanity. The judge overseeing her case, Andrew Maneri, called the crimes shockingly depraved and noted that even in his long career dealing with criminal cases, this one stood out as particularly horrific. Her co-conspirators faced justice, with Rafferty sentenced to 10 years and Hutton to 4 years. As for Vicky Bevan, she pleaded guilty to all charges and is now serving her time in a high-security prison in the UK. Vanessa George. Last but not least is Vanessa George, an employee at Little Ted's nursery in Plymouth, where she worked with young children, toddlers, and babies. She was trusted by parents to care for their kids, but what happened behind closed doors was far from nurturing. Between 2008 and 2009, Vanessa George began abusing the children under her care. She filmed the abuse and shared the disturbing images with a man named Colin Blanchard, who she met online. Blanchard wasn't the only one involved. Others like Angela Allen were also part of this sick network that circulated abuse material online. George admitted to a shocking 7 counts of sexual assault and 6 counts of making and distributing indecent images of children. However, it is estimated that she had contact with as many as 180 children during her time at the nursery. Let's take a closer look at how this came to light. It wasn't a co-worker or parent who exposed George. It was Blanchard's phone that was seized by police. On his device, officers found explicit WhatsApp conversations and images sent by George, which led to her arrest in June 2009. The evidence against her was overwhelming. After all, she had filmed herself abusing toddlers and babies. In court, Vanessa George pleaded guilty to her crimes and was sentenced to an indefinite prison term in 2009. At the time, it was said she would serve a minimum of 7 years before being eligible for parole. Her sentence sparked outrage, with many feeling that the punishment didn't match the crime. But, as if the story wasn't already heart-wrenching, George was released from prison in 2019 after serving 10 years. The parole board deemed her no longer a threat to children, and she was released under strict conditions, including never being allowed to work with children again and being banned from Devon and Cornwall, the areas where her crimes took place. She also remains on the offenders register for life. However, the parents were furious, with one even saying they would take justice into their own hands if they ever encountered her. Politicians and local leaders, including MP Luke Pollard, expressed their anger and called it a dark day for British justice. As society grapples with the unsettling truth that predators aren't always who we expect, the real challenge remains confronting the uncomfortable and ensuring that vigilance outlasts punishment. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into similar content, go ahead and click on the videos displayed on your screen right now. Each one offers more captivating stories and insights that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.